Welcome to the Indigenous Participation Plan Toolkit, a resource to support First Nations and contractors participating in the Alexandra Bridge Replacement Project, or ABRP. This presentation was developed by Cambium Indigenous Professional Services to help all project partners understand what Indigenous Participation Plans, or IPPs, are and how they strengthen collaboration throughout every stage of a project. An Indigenous Participation Plan, or IPP, is a procurement tool designed to ensure Indigenous peoples are involved in all stages of a project, from design to completion. The IPP promotes engagement, inclusion, training, and Indigenous business opportunities throughout project design and execution. Most importantly, it is intended to recognize and respect Indigenous rights, cultures, and knowledge systems by meaningfully involving communities in project planning and delivery. In short, an IPP ensures Indigenous participation and perspectives are woven into every part of a project. It's also important to understand what an IPP is not. An IPP is not intended to increase the overall cost of procuring goods and services. It supports the duty to consult and accommodate, but does not replace that legal obligation. And it's not executed by the federal government. It's carried out by the successful bidder, with monitoring and compliance managed by the federal procurement manager. Simply put, IPPs don't add cost, don't replace consultation duties, and aren't government-run. They're practical tools to support Indigenous inclusion and accountability. Indigenous participation plans play an essential role in federal procurement processes. Here's how they work. The federal government uses IPPs as an evaluation criterion, meaning bidders are assessed partly on how well they include Indigenous participation. Bidders must develop and include clear Indigenous participation commitments in their bids. IPPs may also be aligned with modern treaty obligations, ensuring they reflect current legal and cultural frameworks. Once awarded, an IPP becomes a legally enforceable part of the winning bidder's contract, holding the contractor accountable for delivery. And finally, IPPs support federal policy for Indigenous inclusion in the economy, including set-asides, the 5% Indigenous procurement target, and ongoing tracking of Indigenous participation and spending. By integrating IPPs into federal procurement, the government ensures that inclusion and reconciliation are not just intentions, they're measurable commitments built into every contract. Although not perfect, IPPs are a generally accepted procurement/relationship tool when executed with positive intentions. From the Indigenous perspective, IPPs support sovereignty and self-determination, create economic inclusion and shared prosperity, and promote cultural and environmental stewardship. IPPs also have a unique opportunity to empower Indigenous youth and future generations. From the government perspective, IPPs support legal and constitutional obligations, create economic and social benefits, strengthen relationships with Indigenous communities, and support co-development activities with Indigenous people. Together, these perspectives show that IPPs are not just policy tools. If they are designed with intent and successfully executed, they can act as pathways for partnership and prosperity. A complete IPP may include many components. It may include a human resources plan to track and document Indigenous employment hours on a project. It may include a skills development plan targeting Indigenous workforce development through training and opportunities. It may include an Indigenous business plan designed to procure goods and services from Indigenous-owned entities. It may also include a capacity building plan designed to strengthen community readiness and sustainability for this and future opportunities. Items that could be included in these plans are mentorship programs, scholarships, cultural exchange activities, or community-led initiatives that continue long after construction ends. In addition, projects may include innovative measures, which are unique efforts that create an innovative community benefit that result from the project execution. Innovative ideas would generally be tied to the project and support an identified community desire or need. Together, these elements allow for a flexible, measurable, and impactful framework for Indigenous participation. When implemented successfully, Indigenous participation plans can achieve notable outcomes. For Indigenous communities and people, IPPs bring economic development, employment, and training opportunities, capacity building opportunities, and environmental stewardship and cultural preservation opportunities. For the federal government, IPPs create paths to economic reconciliation, help reduce socioeconomic gaps, and build stronger relationships with Indigenous peoples. Finally, for contractors, successful IPPs lead to project certainty and risk reduction, enhanced project success, innovation, and efficiency, and may result in a stronger reputation built on trust and collaboration with Indigenous partners. A well-executed IPP creates benefits for everyone, fostering inclusion, reliability, and long-term impact. For the Alexandra Bridge Replacement Project, IPP engagement happens primarily at 3 stages. Initially, the design of the IPP bid criterion included input from Indigenous communities and people, federal procurement personnel, and their support teams. This stage is now complete, and IPP considerations were included in the bid documents. Second, the project is currently in the final bid process, and Indigenous communities, organizations, and businesses will engage with the 3 qualified bidders to develop the IPP for their bids. For the Alexandra Bridge Replacement Project, 3 bidders have been pre-qualified to submit final bids. Each bidder must now develop their IPP to match the scoring elements in the bid documents. This step will require bidders to connect directly with Indigenous communities, businesses, and individuals to identify the most strategic and cost-effective approach to meeting IPP bid scoring requirements. Finally, after the award, the winning bidder, communities, and federal procurement managers work together to track and deliver on IPP commitments. This is where bidders are held accountable to their IPP submissions. Communities and bidders must be ready at this stage to connect with each other on IPP bid submissions. As the process moves through this stage of the Alexandria Bridge Replacement Project, preparation and communication are keys to success. Both Indigenous communities and qualified bidders have important roles to play, and success depends on working together early and respectfully. For Indigenous communities and organizations, this means building relationships with qualified bidders and co-defining participation in the IPP. Communities should help bidders understand community employment and training opportunities, as well as advocate for the procurement of Indigenous goods and services. Communities need to clearly communicate their preferred IPP outcomes so they can be built into the bid. For qualified bidders, a quality bid starts with engagement. Bidders should make initial contact with Indigenous participants as early as possible. Bidders will need to be patient as communities need time to review, consult, and respond to requests. Bidders should have dedicated team members to support IPP inclusion and relationship building. Bidders may also consider Indigenous awareness training to strengthen their understanding and collaboration with Indigenous partners. When working together, both sides should remember a few key realities. This is a competitive bid process, and there is no IPP benefit if the bid is not successful. That means it is important to understand how the project budget supports Indigenous participation and understand that the most successful outcomes will always be those built on mutual benefit and shared commitment. By coming prepared, engaging early, and collaborating openly, both Indigenous partners and bidders can ensure the IPP creates lasting value, not just for the project, but for the relationships that will continue long after it's complete. Creating a strong IPP happens with 3 key steps: information sharing, coordination, and bid submission. Information sharing begins with an initial meeting to exchange ideas, needs, and desired outcomes. It's about sharing documents, information, and resources to build a common understanding and to identify opportunities for greater Indigenous participation. Next is coordination. During this step, Indigenous participants and bidders work together to plan bid timelines with clearly defined roles and schedules. Open communication is critical, and keeping a single point of contact often keeps things running smoothly. Finally, bid submission. Bid documents must be shared with and supported by Indigenous participants, ensuring that Indigenous community information and endorsement of the IPP are explicit. These 3 steps, sharing, coordinating, and submitting, create a transparent and inclusive IPP submission. While IPPs offer many benefits, they can also present challenges that require patience and collaboration. Sometimes Indigenous partners have different priorities than bidders, or they may choose not to engage in a bid because of other community needs. In other cases, the IPP focuses on short-term project outcomes, while the community has longer-term goals that extend beyond project timelines. Community capacity can also be a challenge. There may not be enough time or resources to respond to tight bid schedules. And finally, monitoring and reporting requirements can add extra costs or administrative burdens to a bid. Understanding and talking through these challenges helps all partners build trust, set realistic expectations, and develop stronger plans together. The ABRP Indigenous Participation Plan Toolkit was developed to help everyone involved in the Alexandra Bridge Replacement Project. Bidders, Indigenous communities, and government partners can now work from a shared foundation of knowledge, connection, and opportunity. This toolkit includes a suite of practical resources designed to make participation easier and more effective. The key tools available are a frequently asked questions guide that explains IPP processes, expectations, and common challenges in simple terms. The ABRP Qualified Bidders Contact List is available to support early and meaningful engagement. The ABRP Indigenous Communities of Interest Contact List will help bidders and Indigenous organizations connect directly. An Indigenous supplier list with data collected from multiple sources of Indigenous suppliers is also included. Note that our team has not qualified nor verified these suppliers, but the list can act as a starting point for building the project-related supply chain. The ABRP Opportunities Guide and Project Handbook both highlight where Indigenous participation can be integrated into the project. Together, these tools form a collaborative resource, supporting readiness, connection, and shared success across all partners in the Indigenous Participation Plan process. SIPS is a certified Indigenous business based on Curve Lake First Nation, just north of Peterborough, Ontario. We take pride in helping projects like the Alexandra Bridge Replacement Project create lasting impact that builds capacity and strengthens relationships between Indigenous communities and industry. We are here to support the ABRP Indigenous Participation Plan when and however needed. Let us know how we can support your efforts for the best IPP outcomes.